There is a hidden truth about being a good person that few dare to speak. Most of us grow up believing that if we are kind, fair, and generous, the world will return that goodness to us. We tell ourselves that love, respect, and peace naturally flow to those who give them. But life does not always work like that. In fact, many good people discover, often painfully, that their goodness can become a weapon used against them. This is not a reason to abandon kindness. It is, however, a reason to awaken. Because goodness without awareness can lead not to fulfillment, but to exhaustion, disappointment, and even despair. So, let me share with you 5 dark, but honest pieces of advice for those who strive to be good. Not to discourage you, but to arm you with truth, so that your light may endure in a world that is not always gentle. We like to believe that goodness is a universal language, that kindness will always be met with gratitude, that a gentle hand will be recognized for its sincerity. Yet reality reveals something much darker. Not everyone wants your goodness. In fact, many will twist it, exploit it, and see in it not strength but weakness. This is perhaps one of the most painful truths for good people to confront, because it shatters the illusion that the world is inherently fair. Consider for a moment the employee who stays late every night at the office. She believes that her hard work will be recognized, that loyalty will eventually be rewarded. But instead, her silence and her sacrifice are taken for granted. Her managers promote the louder voices, the ones who demand recognition, while she continues to be the dependable shadow in the background. Her goodness has not elevated her. It has been used against her. The unspoken thought in her boss's mind is simple. She will not complain, and so she is left behind. Or imagine the friend who always says yes. The one who listens patiently, who lends money without asking for it back, who drives across the city in the middle of the night when someone else is in need. For a time, people gather around him. He feels useful, loved even. But when the moment comes when he needs help, when he finally dares to reach out, silence answers. Those who eagerly took his kindness have no space for his pain. He gave endlessly, but when the scales turned, he found himself standing alone. What these examples reveal is not that kindness is wrong, but that kindness, when unguarded, becomes dangerous. The world is full of people who will take what you offer without hesitation, without the slightest thought of giving back. Not because they are necessarily evil, but because human beings often follow the path of least resistance. If someone will give and give without boundaries, there are always those who will gladly keep receiving. The responsibility, then, does not lie in hoping that others will suddenly become fair, but in learning discernment. To discern means to recognize who is truly worthy of your goodness. It means seeing through charm, through neediness, through the flattering words of those who praise you only so they may take more. It is not about becoming hard, cold, or selfish. It is about understanding that your goodness is a finite resource. Just as the body grows weary when it is overworked, so too does the soul grow weary when it is endlessly drained. To give without measure is not noble, it is self-destruction disguised as virtue. There is a reason airplanes instruct you to put your own oxygen mask on before helping others. You cannot give breath if you cannot breathe. Yet how many good people suffocate every day, rushing to tend to everyone else, believing it is selfish to protect their own energy. They misunderstand what goodness truly is. True goodness is not an endless pouring out until nothing remains. True goodness is sustainable. It requires balance, and it requires the courage to say no. This courage is not easy to find. Many of us were raised with the belief that being good means being accommodating, agreeable, and endlessly available. We were taught that selflessness is the highest virtue. But selflessness taken to its extreme becomes erasure. You vanish under the weight of everyone else's demands. Slowly, you begin to resent those you once loved. You feel bitterness growing where generosity once lived, and when resentment poisons the heart, goodness itself begins to rot. To protect your goodness is to preserve the purity of your intention. It is to say, I will give, but I will not be used. I will love, but I will not be drained. I will serve, but I will not disappear. This requires boundaries, and boundaries are often mistaken for cruelty. They are not. A boundary is not a wall, it is a gate. It allows you to choose who enters and who does not. It ensures that the garden of your soul is not trampled by those who have no respect for what grows there. Think of those who inspire us most, the great teachers, the healers, the leaders who changed history. They were good, yes, but their goodness was not naive. They knew how to protect their energy. They knew how to say no. They understood that if they gave themselves away to everyone who demanded, they would be left with nothing to give at all. Their goodness was powerful because it was disciplined. It was not scattered to the wind, but channeled with intention. To discern who deserves your kindness, you must learn to watch not what people say, but what they do. Gratitude reveals itself in action. Respect reveals itself in reciprocity. If someone receives your kindness yet never once considers your needs, pay attention. If someone asks for your time but never values it, see clearly. If someone takes your loyalty as their entitlement, understand what you are witnessing. Goodness should not be blind. It is not selfish to be selective with your kindness. It is wise. It ensures that when you give, your giving has depth and meaning. It ensures that your kindness is not wasted on those who only drain, but invested in those who uplift and cherish it. And in this way, your goodness not only survives, it grows. The hard truth is that not everyone wants your goodness. Some will see it as weakness. Some will see it as an invitation to take without end. Some will never even notice it at all. But when you learn to guard it, to honor it, to give it only where it can bear fruit, then your goodness becomes something far greater than mere niceness. It becomes strength. It becomes clarity. It becomes a light that cannot be extinguished by the darkness of exploitation. Guard your goodness, not out of fear, but out of love, for yourself, for your own life, and for the people who truly deserve the gift of your heart. Only then will your kindness endure. Only then will it be the force that transforms, rather than the weakness that is consumed. We all like to imagine ourselves as creatures of light, defined by our goodness, our patience, our generosity, and our capacity for love. We construct an image of who we are and then work tirelessly to uphold it. But beneath this carefully polished exterior there are forces we do not wish to name. Anger, envy, jealousy, resentment, aggression. These emotions rise up like shadows in the corners of our being. And what do most good people do when confronted with them? They suppress them, push them down, and tell themselves, "This is not who I am." They cling to the illusion that if they bury the darkness deep enough, it will disappear. But the truth is far more dangerous. Darkness does not vanish when ignored. It festers, it grows, and in time it takes control in ways you cannot see until it is too late. Picture the devoted father, the man whose patience was legendary among his family. He bore every insult, every moment of disrespect, every careless dismissal of his efforts with a smile. He told himself that patience was strength, that silence was virtue. He swallowed his resentment for years, pushing it deeper and deeper into his subconscious, convincing himself that anger had no place in him. And then, one evening, over something utterly trivial, the explosion came. A slammed door, a violent shout, a rage so disproportionate it shocked everyone who witnessed it, including himself. His darkness, unacknowledged and unintegrated, had built itself into a storm. When it finally broke, it caused far more harm than if he had simply dared to face it years before. This is the danger of suppression. When we deny our shadow, we do not eliminate it. We make it unconscious, and the unconscious always finds a way to express itself. Perhaps it slips out in sarcasm or in passive-aggressive remarks. Perhaps it hides in our bodies, manifesting as stress, illness, or chronic fatigue. Perhaps it builds until one day, in a moment of weakness, it bursts out uncontrollably. The shadow you ignore does not go away. It rules you from the dark. The tragedy is that many good people confuse acknowledgement with indulgence. They believe that if they admit to their anger, they are becoming hateful. If they recognize their envy, they are becoming malicious. But acknowledgement is not indulgence. To acknowledge is simply to see clearly what is already there. To pretend otherwise is to live in self-deception. There is no human being alive who does not carry anger, who does not experience jealousy, who does not feel the pull of selfish desires or destructive impulses. These are not flaws of your being, they are part of it. They are remnants of your most primal instincts, survival mechanisms etched into your psyche across thousands of years. To be alive is to wrestle with them. The question is not whether you have a shadow. The question is whether you will let it consume you or whether you will bring it into the light of consciousness. When you acknowledge your darkness, something remarkable happens. What once felt dangerous and shameful becomes fuel. Anger, for example, is often portrayed as purely destructive, but anger, when recognized and integrated, becomes courage. It becomes the force that rises when injustice is done, the energy that propels you to set boundaries, the fire that demands you stand up for yourself. Without anger, many people remain trapped in lives of quiet oppression, unable to resist exploitation. The shadow of anger, brought into the light, becomes the strength to say, enough. Fear, too, is often misunderstood. We run from fear, pretend it does not exist, or drown it in false confidence. But fear, when acknowledged, can become wisdom. It sharpens your senses, makes you attentive to dangers you might otherwise overlook. It teaches you humility, reminding you of your limits and your vulnerabilities. A soldier who feels no fear is reckless. A soldier who acknowledges his fear is careful, alert, and prepared. Fear becomes destructive only when denied, only when hidden, only when allowed to grow into panic because it was never faced. Even envy, which so many treat as a poisonous weakness, has within it the seed of growth. To feel envy is to recognize what you desire but do not yet have. If acknowledged, envy can show you the path toward your own aspirations. It can become the spark that drives you to work harder, to refine your craft, to pursue your potential. But when repressed, envy becomes bitterness, corroding relationships and eating away at the soul. You see, the shadow is not evil in itself. It is raw energy, untamed, unrefined, dangerous if denied, but powerful if integrated. To integrate the shadow is not to indulge in cruelty, but to bring the unconscious into consciousness. It is to say, yes, I am capable of anger. Yes, I feel envy. Yes, I know fear. These are not alien forces invading me. They are part of who I am. And because I see them, they do not control me. I control them. The greatest danger is not in having a shadow, but in pretending you do not. History is full of examples of people who presented themselves as saints, who denied their darkness so completely that it consumed them from within, emerging in acts of cruelty and hypocrisy. The more a person clings to the image of being pure or good, the more violently their shadow seeks expression. By contrast, those who admit their flaws, who face their darker impulses honestly, often live with greater balance, because they are not slaves to what lies beneath. For good people especially, this lesson is essential. Too often, in their pursuit of being kind, they mistake repression for virtue. They silence themselves when wronged, believing that anger makes them unworthy. They swallow their pain, convinced that to complain is selfish. They deny their jealousy, telling themselves that a good person should be above such feelings, but this is not goodness, this is blindness. And blindness does not make you holy, it makes you vulnerable. The path to wholeness is not the rejection of your darkness, but its integration. To be whole is to carry both light and shadow within you, to understand that you are not merely a creature of kindness, but a creature of complexity. When you accept this, you are no longer fragile. You cannot be shattered by the sudden eruption of anger or the sting of envy, because you have already faced these forces and claimed them as your own. To deny the shadow is to let it master you. To acknowledge it is to master yourself. This is the paradox. The very emotions you fear, when seen and embraced, become the foundation of your strength. They are not enemies to be destroyed, but parts of your being waiting to be transformed. If you dare to look into your darkness, you will find not the end of your goodness, but the root of your power. There is a dangerous illusion that has taken root in the minds of many good people, the belief that to be virtuous one must give without end, that to be selfless means to erase oneself entirely, that to love others means to neglect oneself completely. This illusion is seductive because it cloaks itself in noble language. We are told that sacrifice is the highest proof of love, that service without limit is the truest form of goodness. And so countless souls pour themselves out until nothing is left, convinced they are fulfilling some higher duty. But beneath this facade of virtue lies a dark and corrosive truth. Goodness without boundaries breeds resentment, and resentment, left unspoken, poisons the very well from which goodness flows. Think of the nurse who devotes herself entirely to her patients. Day and night she tends to their needs, holding their hands, easing their pain, giving every ounce of her energy to preserve their dignity. In the beginning, her work feels like a calling, a sacred mission. But she forgets to sleep, she forgets to eat properly, she silences her own exhaustion, she convinces herself that her life matters less than those she serves, and slowly her body begins to collapse under the weight of her neglect. The flame that once lit the path for others burns down to a fragile ember, and here lies the tragedy. The very goodness she tried so desperately to uphold is lost, not because she lacked devotion, but because she lacked boundaries. Sacrifice without limits is not holiness. It is self-betrayal. To give endlessly without regard for your own health, your own soul, your own dignity, is to reduce yourself to an instrument, an object, something to be used until it breaks. And once broken, not only are you unable to help others, but the goodness that once defined you becomes replaced by bitterness. Resentment grows quietly, often unnoticed at first. You continue to smile, continue to serve, but beneath the surface you begin to ask, why does no one care for me the way I care for them? Why does no one notice my sacrifice? Why am I always the one to give, while others only take? These questions whisper in your mind, and with each unanswered echo the resentment deepens. Goodness that has been twisted into self-erasure eventually turns sour. What began as love transforms into quiet rage. What began as generosity becomes a burden. The mother who gives everything to her children but never allows herself a moment of rest begins to snap at them, not because she does not love them, but because she has lost herself in them. The friend who always says yes, who never refuses, who bends to every demand, finds themselves secretly despising the very people they long to support. And in this hidden resentment, relationships begin to fracture. Not because the intention to give was wrong, but because the giving was without limit, without balance, without boundaries. Boundaries are not selfish. They are sacred. They are the invisible lines that protect the flame of your spirit, ensuring it continues to burn brightly. A candle that burns at both ends soon disappears, and with it the light it once gave is gone forever. If you wish to give light to the world, you must first protect the wick that sustains you. To refuse this responsibility is not virtue. It is a slow form of self-destruction. There is profound wisdom in the simple truth that to love others well, you must love yourself enough to say no. To protect your energy, your time, your body, your soul, is not a betrayal of goodness but its very foundation. The tree that gives fruit season after season is not the tree that allows itself to be hacked down for firewood. It is the tree that grows strong roots, that draws water and nourishment for itself, so that it may continue to give abundantly. Without tending to its own life, it would die, and with it its capacity to feed others. Many resist this truth because it feels uncomfortable. To set boundaries often means disappointing others, saying no when they expect a yes, withdrawing when they demand your presence. It can even mean being misunderstood, labeled selfish or cold. But the alternative is far worse. The alternative is to live in constant exhaustion, to become a shell of yourself, to continue giving until you collapse, and then to discover that many of those you sacrificed for never truly valued what you gave in the first place. The pain of boundaries is temporary, but the pain of resentment is permanent. Resentment seeps into every corner of your being. It colors the way you see others, turning acts of service into obligations, turning relationships into burdens. It robs goodness of its joy and transforms it into duty, and when goodness becomes duty alone, it loses its soul. It is vital to understand that goodness does not mean endless availability. Goodness is not measured by how much of yourself you erase for the sake of others. True goodness is measured by the authenticity of what you give. If you give with joy, if you give with balance, if you give while still honoring your own dignity, then your goodness is alive. But if you give out of compulsion, out of fear of being unloved, out of a desperate need to please, then your goodness is hollow. It is not a gift, but a transaction you hope will one day be repaid. There is strength in being able to say, I cannot give today because I must rest. I cannot meet this demand because it crosses the boundary of my dignity. I cannot serve endlessly because I, too, deserve to be cared for. These are not the words of selfishness. These are the words of wisdom. They preserve the core of your being so that your goodness can endure for years to come. We must learn to see boundaries not as walls that keep people out, but as gates that determine who and what is allowed to enter. They are not built from cruelty, but from love, love for the self and love for others, because they ensure that when you give, you are giving from wholeness, not from depletion. A life without boundaries is a life lived in quiet despair, always pouring, never being filled. A life with boundaries is a life of balance, where giving and receiving flow naturally, where goodness is sustainable, where resentment has no soil in which to take root. If you truly wish to serve others, then protect yourself. If you truly wish to embody goodness, then honor your own needs as sacred. Only then can your flame continue to shine, not for a brief and painful moment, but for a lifetime. Here lies one of the most difficult truths for the human heart to accept. The world does not reward goodness alone. We are told as children that if we do the right thing, if we act with kindness, if we are honest and fair, life will repay us with happiness, success, and peace. We cling to this belief because it gives meaning to our sacrifices and makes our suffering tolerable. Yet reality is far more brutal. Life does not operate on moral equations. The universe does not guarantee that virtue will be recognized or that truth will prevail in the end. History is filled with the stories of those who gave everything to live honestly and courageously, only to be cast aside, forgotten, or punished for their goodness, while those who lied, manipulated, and exploited others climbed to power and comfort. This is not cynicism, it is truth, and it must be faced if your goodness is to survive without breaking you. Think of the whistleblower, the one who risks everything to speak the truth. They step forward because they believe honesty will be honored, that justice will triumph. Yet how often do we see them silenced, stripped of their positions, attacked and humiliated by the very systems they sought to protect? They lose careers, reputations, and sometimes their safety. Their integrity does not bring them reward in the eyes of the world, it brings them exile. Or consider the countless unnamed people throughout history, those who lived simple, honest lives. They worked hard, they raised families, they served their communities with quiet devotion. And yet, when they were gone, the world scarcely noticed. Their names vanished, their sacrifices unrecorded. Meanwhile, tyrants and opportunists carved their names into monuments, remembered not for virtue, but for the power they seized. If you are to live as a good person, you must understand this painful paradox. If your goodness depends on applause, on recognition, on some promise that the world will repay you, it will not survive. Because there will be times when your kindness is mocked, when your sacrifices are taken for granted, when your honesty costs you opportunities, and when your integrity isolates you. If you have tied your goodness to the hope of reward, disappointment will hollow you out until bitterness consumes you. But this truth does not mean goodness is worthless. On the contrary, it reveals the deeper essence of what it means to be good. True goodness is not a bargain with the world. It is a commitment to yourself. It is a vow to live in alignment with your values, even if no one applauds, even if no one notices, even if no one remembers. To live this way requires immense courage because it means walking through a world that may punish your honesty and still refusing to abandon it. It means understanding that integrity is its own reward, that the peace of looking yourself in the mirror without shame is worth more than any recognition the world could offer. We deceive ourselves when we imagine that history always bends toward justice, or that virtue will always be vindicated. Sometimes it does, but often it does not. Yet the measure of a life is not in the recognition it receives, but in the quiet strength with which it is lived. The world may ignore you, but your soul does not. Every time you choose to act with integrity, you are shaping the depths of your being, forging something within you that cannot be destroyed by external neglect. The cunning may thrive for a season. They may manipulate their way into positions of power. They may gather wealth through deception. They may silence their critics with cruelty. But beneath their triumphs lies a hollow core. They live in fear of exposure, in paranoia of betrayal, in emptiness that no applause can fill. And often, when their time passes, they are remembered not with reverence but with disgust. Goodness, though it may go unrewarded in the moment, endures in ways that cunning never can. It imprints itself on the souls it touches, on the unseen fabric of human life, even if no history book records it. Imagine the teacher who spends her life shaping young minds, pouring her patience and love into children who may never thank her. She may retire without wealth, without recognition, her name unknown beyond the walls of her classroom. Yet the ripple of her goodness travels silently through generations, in the lives of those she taught, in the values they carry forward, in the kindness they one day pass to others. She may not be rewarded by the world, but she has lived in alignment with something eternal. This is why goodness must be rooted not in recognition, but in integrity. You cannot control how others will respond to your kindness. You cannot guarantee that the truth you speak will be honored. You cannot ensure that your sacrifices will be remembered, but you can control the ground on which you stand. You can decide that your actions will not be dictated by applause or rejection, but by your own commitment to live honestly. In a world where external rewards are uncertain, the only security is the knowledge that you have not betrayed yourself. There is a profound strength in this kind of goodness. It cannot be broken by disappointment because it expects no reward. It cannot be corrupted by resentment because it does not demand recognition. It stands firm even in isolation because it is rooted not in the shifting winds of approval, but in the bedrock of self-respect. This is the kind of goodness that survives when the cunning seem to win, when the dishonest seem to prosper, when the world looks away. It is tempting, when faced with the unfairness of life, to abandon goodness altogether, to harden the heart and say, "Why should I give if no one gives to me? Why should I be honest if dishonesty thrives? Why should I be kind if cruelty is rewarded?" But in surrendering to that bitterness, you do not punish the world. You only betray yourself. You strip yourself of the dignity that no one can take from you. To live with goodness in a world that may never reward it is not easy. It requires courage greater than that of the opportunist. It requires endurance, faith in the unseen, and the will to stand firm when recognition does not come. But this is precisely what makes such goodness profound. It is not dependent, it is not transactional, it is not fragile. It is a force that comes from within, a light that burns not for applause, but because it cannot do otherwise. If you live in this way, even if the world overlooks you, even if history forgets you, you will not have betrayed yourself. And in the end, that is the greatest reward, the peace of knowing that you lived with integrity, that your goodness was real, and that nothing, not neglect, not injustice, not even death, could take that away. There is a tragic misconception that to be good is enough, that if one simply practices kindness, patience, and forgiveness, the world will bend in recognition of such purity. But life is not so merciful. To seek only goodness is to remain unprepared for the storms that inevitably come. If you rely only on gentleness, you risk breaking at the first harsh wind, for life does not honor fragility. It honors those who are whole, those who can withstand the weight of contradiction, who can bear both light and shadow within themselves without being consumed by either. Consider what it means to be whole. It is not about choosing between being good or bad. It is not about abandoning kindness in favor of ruthlessness. Wholeness is the recognition that you are capable of both. Within you exists the potential for creation and destruction, compassion and cruelty, forgiveness and vengeance. To deny one side is to live in illusion. A person who insists on being only good blinds themselves to their own instincts, leaving them vulnerable to those who would exploit their naivety. But a person who embraces the totality of their being becomes unshakable, because they are not living a half-truth. They have seen their own darkness and made peace with it. Think of the strongest individuals you have ever known. Were they simply kind? No, they were far more than that. They were kind when kindness was possible, but when the moment demanded firmness, they could stand their ground. When betrayal came, they did not dissolve into self-pity, but neither did they lose their ability to trust again. They walked the line between hope and despair, refusing to let either extreme define them. This is what it means to be whole. to be able to live fully in the paradoxes of life without collapsing under their weight. Let me give you a story. A woman I once knew lived her entire life serving others. She was the picture of selflessness, always giving, always forgiving, always putting her needs last. People praised her for her goodness, but quietly many took advantage of it. Friends leaned on her without ever offering support. Family members expected her sacrifices without gratitude. At first, she accepted this as her lot in life, believing her worth came from being endlessly giving. But over time, bitterness began to grow inside her. She felt invisible, unappreciated, and depleted. One day, after years of carrying this silent burden, she finally broke down and wept not because others had treated her poorly, but because she realized she had betrayed herself in the name of being good. Her journey toward wholeness began the moment she stopped trying to be only good. She started setting boundaries. She allowed herself to say no. She admitted her anger, her exhaustion, her longing to be seen. It frightened her at first because it felt selfish, but in truth, it was the first time she was being honest with herself. Over time, her relationships transformed. Some people left, offended that they could no longer use her. But others stayed, and for the first time she experienced love that was mutual, respect that was real. Her goodness became stronger, not weaker, because it was now rooted in wholeness. This is the path I urge you to walk. Do not aspire merely to be good, for goodness alone is fragile. Strive to be whole, for wholeness is unbreakable. To be whole is to be courageous enough to face your anger, your envy, your pain, and to transmute them into sources of strength. Anger can become the fire that protects you from exploitation. Fear can become the wisdom that warns you of danger. Even sorrow can deepen your compassion, making your kindness more profound. But if you deny these elements, if you try to bury them, they will turn against you. They will appear in moments of weakness, erupting uncontrollably, leaving you at the mercy of what you refused to face. Wholeness demands resilience. Life will test you, through betrayal, through loss, through the indifference of a world that often does not reward virtue. To endure these trials without losing yourself is the mark of true strength. The man who suffers injustice but still chooses to act with integrity is stronger than the one who never faced hardship. The woman who endures heartbreak but still keeps her heart open is more powerful than the one who avoids love out of fear. Strength is not the absence of pain, but the ability to carry it without being destroyed. The mistake many make is believing that to be strong one must become hardened, closed off, unfeeling. But this too is a half-life. To close your heart to avoid pain is to also close it to joy. True wholeness does not ask you to choose numbness over suffering, but to accept that both belong to the human experience. The strongest people are not those who build walls around themselves, but those who allow themselves to remain open even when life wounds them. They know that vulnerability is not weakness, but the gateway to connection, and connection is where life finds its meaning. Think also of history's figures who embodied wholeness. Those who fought for justice were not simply good. They were fierce, determined, willing to confront the darkest forces of their time. Yet they were also capable of forgiveness, of seeing the humanity even in those who opposed them. Their power came not from blind goodness, nor from ruthless strength, but from the integration of both. They were whole, and because of that, they could endure storms that would have crushed others. So ask yourself, do you wish to be seen as merely good, or do you wish to be unshakable? If you seek only to be good, you will spend your life bending under the weight of others' demands, easily discarded when your usefulness runs out. But if you strive to be whole, you will discover a strength that no one can take from you. You will no longer give your kindness blindly, but wisely. You will no longer fear your darkness, but learn to walk with it. You will no longer depend on the world's recognition, but on your own integrity. To be whole is to live truthfully, to face yourself in your entirety, and to accept that both light and shadow belong to you. This is not an easy path. It is far more difficult than the shallow comfort of being merely good. But it is the only path that leads to true strength, to a life that cannot be broken by the cruelty of the world. And when you become whole, your goodness will no longer be fragile. It will no longer be a mask. It will become something unshakable, something forged in the fire of reality itself. And that kind of goodness, the goodness of a whole and awakened soul, is the rarest and most powerful force in the world. So, if you are a good person, know this: your path will not always be easy. There will be times when the world seems to punish your kindness, when shadows rise within you, and when your giving feels endless. But remember, your goodness is not meant to be blind. It is meant to be wise. Protect it with boundaries, strengthen it with awareness, and root it not in the hope of reward, but in the knowledge that to live with integrity is itself the highest victory. Goodness is not weakness, it is not naivete, it is a conscious choice made by those who see life clearly in all its light and darkness, and still choose to shine.